Imagine a distant time when the first civilizations emerged from the ashes of the flood. Amidst this setting arises a mysterious and powerful figure, someone who would stand out among his contemporaries for his strength, intelligence, and above all, his influence. This is Nimrod, a name that echoes to this day in biblical stories and oral tradition. But who was Nimrod really? A king? A warrior? A hunter? Or perhaps the first great rebel in human history? Today, we will dive into the life of this enigmatic character, considered by many as the founder of great empires, and, at the same time, as the leader of one of the greatest rebellions against God. His story begins with a lineage marked by a curse and develops amidst conquests, idolatry, and challenges to divine power. But in the end, who was Nimrod really, and what was the impact of his journey? Get ready, for the story we are about to explore reveals not only the power and ambition of a man, but also the consequences of challenging the Creator. To understand who Nimrod was, we need to go even further back in time, to the days of Noah, the man chosen by God to survive the flood and repopulate the earth. After the flood, humanity began to spread once again, and Noah's family played a fundamental role in this. But within this lineage, there was a shadow, a curse that would extend for generations. It all began with Ham, one of Noah's sons. After the flood, a dark incident occurs. Ham dishonors his father in a moment of weakness, and this action provokes Noah's wrath. As a consequence, a curse falls upon Ham and his descendants. And it is from this cursed lineage that Nimrod emerges, the grandson of Ham, son of Cush. Nimrod carries the weight of this curse in his blood, but instead of following a path of repentance or humility, he chooses a path of power and rebellion. From an early age, Nimrod stands out for his physical strength and hunting skills, quickly gaining fame and respect. However, this respect is mixed with fear, as he becomes a leader who rules with an iron fist and an insatiable thirst for control. Nimrod is the result of a lineage marked by conflict with God, and his life becomes the embodiment of this rebellion. It is with this legacy that he rises to become one of the first great kings in history, using his strength not for good, but to expand his dominion and challenge the divine order. Nimrod's story is just beginning, and the world does not yet know what awaits with the rise of this leader. As Nimrod grows, his name begins to spread as that of someone much more than just a mere man. He is not just the grandson of Cush or the great-grandson of Noah. Nimrod becomes a living legend. Known as a mighty hunter before the Lord, he stands out not only for his skill in hunting animals, but for something much more ambitious, hunting for power, influence, and dominion. In an era where brute strength dictated the rules, Nimrod stands out as someone who understood that power does not come solely from physical strength, but also from the ability to command and subjugate others under his control. It is no wonder that he becomes the first great king after the flood, founding what would become the first known empires in human history. He establishes his kingdom in Babel, which would later become the famous Babylon. And his dominion doesn't stop there. Nimrod expands his conquests to Erech, Akkad, and Calneh, becoming the master of vast territories. He is not just any king. He is a conqueror, a man who imposes his will over entire peoples, unifying them under his rule, but always with a touch of fear and oppression. But behind this title of mighty hunter lies an important detail. This power is exercised before the Lord, but not in the sense of submission or service. On the contrary, it is a power that challenges God. Nimrod does not seek to honor the Creator. He seeks to place himself in the position of God, dominating and controlling what he considers to be his right. And here we see the true nature of his leadership. Nimrod is not just a king. He is the symbol of rebellion against heaven. His kingdom grows, his cities flourish, but the seeds of rebellion are already being planted. Nimrod's path to power knows no bounds, and every step towards absolute control is also a step towards an inevitable confrontation with God himself. And thus, Nimrod establishes himself as a powerful figure, but with intentions increasingly distant from justice and truth. The story of the hunter who challenges the divine begins to unfold. With his empire established and his name feared by many, Nimrod decides to take an even bolder step. He doesn't just want to reign over territories, he wants to challenge God himself. And it is at this moment that the plan to build the Tower of Babel is born. a tower that would not only be tall, but so grand that it would symbolize the unification of all humanity under Nimrod's power, and more importantly, a direct defiance of divine authority. Nimrod gathers the people in a great valley, where everyone speaks the same language and shares the same purpose. He convinces the crowd that together they could protect themselves from any future flood or divine judgment. But the true objective goes beyond that. Nimrod wants to create a kingdom where God is unnecessary, where he, as the leader, is seen as the ultimate authority. The Tower of Babel would be a monument to rebellion and human pride. This project was not just a physical construction. It was an attempt to redefine the cosmic order. If they could reach the heavens, they believed they could hold back the hand of God, prevent any further acts of destruction, and perhaps even place themselves on the same level as the Creator. As the tower rises, so too does pride and rebellion. The work progresses, and Nimrod, with his seductive rhetoric and military power, convinces the people that this alliance against God is the key to true freedom and security. The tower, with its carefully molded bricks reaching toward the sky, is not just a feat of engineering. It is the ultimate symbol of human arrogance and the attempt to live without God. But what Nimrod did not anticipate was that this unchecked ambition would bring inevitable consequences. The divine response does not take long. Seeing humanity united against him, God decides to act, not with mass destruction, but in a way that unravels the unity Nimrod so prized. Suddenly, languages are confused, communication becomes impossible, and the great project begins to collapse. The rebellion led by Nimrod is halted, and the dream of a united humanity under a godless kingdom falls apart in the midst of confusion and chaos. The Tower of Babel, which was supposed to be the pinnacle of Nimrod's power, becomes the symbol of his defeat. The plan to equate himself with God is thwarted, and the people are scattered across the earth, each following a new path, speaking a new language. And so, the great kingdom that Nimrod sought to build begins to fragment. He still reigns, but the order he so desired to control is no longer the same. Nimrod's story continues, but now he knows that his greatest enemy is not another king or empire. It is God himself, against whom he chose to fight. Despite the impact of the Tower of Babel, Nimrod does not abandon his thirst for power. His reign continues, and his fame as a ruthless king spreads. However, amidst his kingdom of strength and idolatry, a figure emerges who would become one of the greatest names in faith: Abraham. This man, known for his unwavering belief in a single God, would become the symbol of everything Nimrod despised. Oral tradition tells us that Abraham, even as a young man, completely rejected the gods worshipped by his father and his generation. He believed in one invisible and all-powerful creator, and this belief put him on a collision course with Nimrod's empire, where idolatry and the worship of gods were the foundation of power. In a tense episode, Abraham destroys the idols in his father's shop, making it clear that he would not submit to the pagan beliefs that dominated the time. When his father returns and sees the destroyed idols, he confronts Abraham, who boldly challenges the logic of idolatry. If these idols cannot even defend themselves, how can they be considered gods? Abraham asks, planting the seed of monotheism. This affront reaches Nimrod, who, in his pride and anger, sees Abraham as a direct threat to his rule and his vision of power. To him, it's not enough to simply reign over men. He wants to be seen as a god. And now, someone emerges who challenges this idea, claiming that there is one God above all. Nimrod summons Abraham for a confrontation. Surrounded by his advisors and subjects, he asks Abraham in whom he places his faith. Abraham responds with conviction, "I believe in one God, the creator of the heavens and the earth." Nimrod, in his arrogance, retorts, "You are wrong. There are many gods, and I am the greatest among them." At that moment, Nimrod decides to test Abraham's faith in the most cruel way possible. He orders that Abraham be thrown into a burning furnace, challenging him to see if this God he so staunchly defends would be able to save him. But Abraham is not intimidated. His confidence in God remains unshaken. And then a miracle happens. Abraham emerges from the furnace unharmed, protected by the faith he carries within him. However, the challenge doesn't end there. Haran, Abraham's brother, who had been undecided about whom to believe, witnesses the miracle and decides to side with Abraham. But Haran does not possess the same steadfast faith as his brother. When he is thrown into the furnace, the miracle does not repeat, and Haran dies before his father in a tragic end. This defeat does not make Nimrod reconsider his path. On the contrary, it hardens his heart even more. He refuses to abandon his gods and continues to rule with an iron fist, determined to maintain his control over the world, even if it means defying the Creator. But now, he knows he is not just dealing with another mortal. He is confronting the faith of someone who carries within him the promise of a nation, of a people who will not bow to any other king except the true God. The story of Nimrod and Abraham marks the clash between two paths, that of arrogance and idolatry versus that of faith and submission to God. And from here, Nimrod's destiny begins to intertwine with the rise of a new people, the chosen people, who would change the course of history forever. Nimrod's power was not sustained solely by his strength or the fear he inspired. There was something more, something that, according to tradition, gave him an almost mystical aura of authority. It is said that Nimrod possessed a special garment, an outfit inherited from Adam, passed down through generations, which held a power that fascinated and subdued those around him. This attire was seen as a symbol of divine royalty and dominion, making Nimrod not just a king, but a nearly sacred figure in the eyes of his subjects. But as time goes on, we see that Nimrod's grandeur begins to fade. His deeds are no longer seen as glories, but as acts of tyranny. He continues to rule with strength, but cracks in his kingdom begin to show. The construction of the Tower of Babel and his confrontation with Abraham left deep scars, and the power that once seemed absolute begins to weaken. Nimrod, who had always been obsessed with maintaining control, now becomes more paranoid. He knows that his power partly depends on this special garment, which he guards with ferocity. But what he doesn't realize is that someone, lurking in the shadows, covets what he possesses. That someone is Esau, the grandson of Abraham. Esau, known for his wild spirit and greed, has his eyes fixed on Nimrod's garment. He believes that if he can obtain it, he will also inherit the power and authority it represents. The relationship between Esau and Nimrod is not clear in the biblical text, but oral traditions and ancient writings suggest that they crossed paths at a critical moment. Despite the generations between them, Nimrod's long life still allowed these two characters to meet. Nimrod, now aged but still holding on to his position with all his might, refuses to part with his garment. He knows it is his last source of power and protects it with all his strength. However, Esau, with his impulsive nature, is determined. Nimrod's decline is a sign that his era is coming to an end, and Esau sees this as an opportunity to seize what he desires. The shadows of greed and ambition loom over them, setting the stage for what is to come next. As Nimrod clings to the last remnant of his glory, he has no idea that his end is drawing nearer. The great king, who once united peoples and built cities, is now shrouded in a cloak of weakness and mistrust. His downfall is no longer a question of if, but of when. And as Nimrod holds tightly to his garment, the world around him begins to change, signaling the end of an era dominated by pride and the rise of new stories and new protagonists who will soon take center stage. Nimrod's story is nearing its conclusion, but before his end, one final tragic act is about to take place, an act that will seal his fate forever. The story reaches its darkest moment. Nimrod, the great hunter and king, who rose as the most powerful of men after the flood, is now in decline. His power, once unquestionable, begins to fracture, and he feels the weight of the years and the choices he made. But he still clings to what he considers his greatest symbol of authority, the garment inherited from Adam, which, according to tradition, granted him an almost mystical power. But this garment, coveted by many, awakens the burning desire of a wild and ruthless figure, Esau. Known for his fierce nature, Esau sees in Nimrod not just a decaying king, but an opportunity. He believes that if he takes possession of this garment, he will inherit the power and authority it represents. This ambition becomes his sole focus. In an unexpected encounter, the lives of Nimrod and Esau cross paths. Nimrod, already worn down, still tries to maintain his posture as an invincible king, but his strength is no longer the same. Esau, with all his youth and vigor, eyes the aging king with a predatory gaze. He does not fear Nimrod. On the contrary, he sees him as prey, a symbol of power within his grasp. Esau does what is in his blood. He hunts, And this time, the prey is Nimrod himself. In a brutal confrontation, Nimrod, the once powerful king, is caught off guard and defeated. Esau kills him, and with this act, takes for himself the garment that so many feared and revered. Nimrod's fall is final. The king who rose by defying God, who built cities and ruled kingdoms, now lies lifeless, with his glory torn from his hands. But fate still holds a bitter irony. Esau, after taking this garment, does not find the power he expected. The symbol he so desired does not grant him the strength or dominion he longed for. Instead, he is consumed by an immediate hunger, a need so urgent that it drives him to sell his birthright for a simple bowl of lentils. This act shows that Nimrod's power, in the end, was not in a garment, but in the arrogance and ambition that drove him throughout his life. Nimrod's end marks the close of an era of rebellion and idolatry, but it also serves as a warning. Power built on pride and violence never endures. Nimrod, the great hunter, became the hunted, and now the world prepares to move on with new leaders, new challenges, and harsh lessons left by the dark legacy of one who tried to equal God. Thus, the era of Nimrod comes to its conclusion, a story of greatness, downfall, and in the end, oblivion. The legend fades into dust, leaving behind only memories and warnings about the cost of unchecked ambition. And so ends the saga of Nimrod, the first great rebel of humanity. A man born into a cursed lineage, yet who chose not to seek redemption. Instead, he walked a path of power, ambition, and pride, using his skills to dominate and subjugate, while attempting to challenge God himself. Nimrod's story shows us how far a human can go when guided by pride and an insatiable thirst for control. From his conquest as a king and hunter to the construction of the Tower of Babel, Nimrod was always in conflict with the Creator, trying to prove that he could create a reality where God had no place. But in the end, everything he built crumbled. His attempt to unite humanity in rebellion against God ended in confusion and dispersion. His belief that he could become a god was shattered by fate itself, which made him fall victim to the ambition of another hunter, Esau. The garment he valued so much, the symbol of his power, could not prevent his downfall. The bitter truth is that the power he sought was fleeting, and his rebellion was a path to destruction. Nimrod's legacy is not one of glory or success. On the contrary, it reminds us that pride, when unchecked, can be the beginning of the end. Nimrod's story serves as a warning, echoing through generations. No matter how strong, influential, or feared someone may be, those who rise against God and give in to idolatry and selfishness will inevitably face their own collapse. In the end, Nimrod becomes a symbol of what happens when one tries to defy divine order. His fall marks the beginning of a new phase in history, a phase where other leaders will rise and where God's plan will continue regardless of human rebellions. Nimrod is remembered, but not for his glory, rather for the warning his life carries. And so, with the last breath of the hunter who wanted to be king, we learn that true power does not lie in dominating others, but in recognizing God's place in our lives. Nimrod's name fades, and the story goes on, with new lessons, new challenges, but always with the same eternal truth. Pride precedes the fall, and those who try to rise against heaven on their own always end up falling. This is the legacy of Nimrod, a story of warning that spans the ages, reminding us of the price of rebellion and the false glory built on unbridled ambition.